Hey, what's going on YouTube? Was just was talking in the comments section to some people, or one guy in particular, on this Ron Moorhead video, and I was just mentioning about like the conferences and where the cover up happens and how it happens, and how at the conferences everything is like pre 1978. Just like Lyle Blackburn talks about these aggressive Bigfoot attacks, but they're all these old documented ones from the 1800s and early 1900s, and even Ron Moorhead is promoted over and over and over and over, and it's like, yeah, it's acceptable by the government and their cover up because it happened back in the 70s. So there's this plausible denial of saying, oh yeah, that was 50, 60 years ago. And I was asking the question, why don't you see Mike Patterson of Sasquatch, Ontario, getting invited to the conferences to talk about his experiences? And obviously, they don't want to hear about psychic Sasquatch experiences, and they don't want his eyewitness testimony, and they don't even want to put people up to question reality in itself, in that regard. And it's just even the David Paulides thing, okay? Like he's donated DNA from Melba Ketchum's DNA study, and he's written books about Bigfoot, and yet he won't talk about Bigfoot at all relating to his missing 411 thing. And I feel like it's the same with the Sasquatch, psychic Sasquatch aspect of Bigfoot that they don't want to talk about. David is creating this big mystery about missing people, but he won't relate it to Bigfoot at all or bring the word or the name Sasquatch even into it. And it's all about generating money, and it's all about money, and that's what the conferences are all about, and keeping Bigfoot this monster, but they never want to talk about like good interactions between humans and Bigfoot. You got that 50 years with Bigfoot or whatever, and that Bigfoot named Fox that the woman's grandfather had interactions with, and you don't you don't see too much of that besides what's been presented already, because they want to keep Bigfoot as a monster, which I know there are many, many, many stories of scariness surrounding the Bigfoot. But what about the intellectualness of the Sasquatch, or their intellectual abilities, and how intelligent are they? It's all right to show an ape doing sign language and making friends with a kitten, concerning that gorilla named Coco, or it's all right to study the intelligence of a chimpanzee and say that we share 98% of our DNA with it, but they refuse to relate the Sasquatch to humanity in any regard like that. Even with Sasquatch Ontario and the fact that he's calling out Mike Patterson's first name in English, they don't want to promote that at all. They don't want to act like you could be a friend with a Sasquatch or befriend one or have a relationship with a clan or with an individual or whatever the case may be. But I was doing some information digging for one guy that asked me, he's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, I'm not asking you that to be in disagreement with you. He's like, what about the cover up of Sasquatch? Because I'm talking about Mike Patterson, and I was saying, I want to hear about M.K. Davis, and I want to hear about him speak more about Bob Gimlin lying in court to get the copyright for the Patterson Gimlin film, which all leads back to making money off of Bigfoot. And in this particular interview here, Down the Rabbit Hole, episode 71 of Sasquatch Chronicles, they're saying, the government agents are telling Bob Garrett and this other gentleman, well, you got to apply for a permit, and it's got to be worth the government's interest. And we're learning about these creatures too, and we want to learn from the experts like you guys. And so I'm like, this is really profound information that has been released that I think people, they're not going back 500 episodes and listening to these earlier episodes so much. But it's fascinating to hear about the government's knowledge of these creatures. And then they're even alluding in this interview to the BFRO and saying, well, the BFRO can bring out 25 people into the woods and they don't need a permit, but somehow Bob Garrett and his group are getting harassed by the feds, and they're coming out of the trees and they're coming out of nowhere, and they know what they're talking about, and they've been recording their conversations, and they're saying there might even be some possible some just different ways that they can detect that these people are in the woods and that they're being spied on and listened to, and they can do that through a cell phone very easily. So once you're being tracked by the government and surveilled, it's part of a government program essentially. I listened to a very recent interview of one gentleman. I don't know if it was on the Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio or which show it was, but he was saying, "Oh yeah, I was out in the woods and I saw these guys with it might have even been on the Confessionals podcast, come to think of it. There was an earlier one where a gentleman shot a Bigfoot in the face in Ohio. But it was one where he says, oh, I saw these guys out there in this SUV with a Bigfoot sticker on the back of their car, like a giant one across the back window of the SUV. And I go up to them and they got AR, rifles in there. And he's trying to go, oh, are you guys interested in Bigfoot? And they just kind of like roll the window up and take off on him like they're out there hunting the thing. And they don't want to talk to him about it. So it made me think back to an experience I had when I started doing this research. And I'm super outspoken when it comes to things, and I'm a veteran of the 9/11 Truth movement. And I realize, YouTube and the internet, this is a battlefield. This is like you're playing chess here. You can just be a pawn in the game and try to get out of the way and dodge the bullet and not have a direct interaction with someone, but this is a battlefield for truth. And I know how to engage people and make them show their cards, so to speak, and figure out where they're coming from and who they are when they're trying to be anonymous on the internet. And there are, presumably government agents and also disinformation agents and people who aren't just open and trying to discover the truth. There are people out here trying to purposely cover up the truth. And it made me think of a story when I was out in probably Evergreenish, Colorado, west of here in the foothills, doing some research. And my wife was actually in Texas, where a lot of these cover-ups seem to take place. And she called me and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm out in the woods." "Why?" She's like, "Somebody just called me and said they know you're out in the woods right now and that you should be shot and thrown in the river." And I'm like, "Are you friggin' kidding me?" Okay, so like I'm out in the woods and then I've got somebody harassing my wife when she's out of state, making her worry about me. I know Forrest Beings told me a story where he was out in the woods and he had a guy come up who had he was way off trail out in the middle of friggin' nowhere, and the guy had the same camera that he did or something, and it was super strange. And they were, I don't know, I know he was armed. I don't know if the other guy was armed or what, but it was just a really strange encounter that kind of made you think twice. And I just realized, this stuff is deep. There is a cover-up of Bigfoot, and you can look at it from that aspect of who's getting harassed, like Bob Garrett when they tried to throw him in prison for coming across the campground where Bigfoot killed 2 people and sent the other guy to the insane asylum. Or, it could be more subtle harassment, just however it is. Or the third aspect is the disregarding aspect of just embracing certain information and denying the other stuff. And it's not like I want to be at a Bigfoot conference. That's the last place I'm trying to go. But just when I pose the question, why isn't Mike Patterson at these conferences, or why aren't people embracing MK Davis for exposing the truth about Bob Gimlin and all these potentials? I mean, whether or not you think that Patty was, you hear some of the stuff MK talks about Patty returning, and going back and getting shot at. I think if you're going to shoot at a Bigfoot, it's going to take off. So I think it's more likely that some of that is disinformation, but I think it's factual that potentially Bob Gimlin was harassing people and threatening them with lawsuits and such to get copies of the Patterson Gimlin film back. And then the payoff is, here, we're going to, and this was with Renee DeHinden from Canada, kind of like coercing him into doing this. And I don't know if Bob was blackmailed or what, but MK Davis alludes to a lot of this. But it should be talked about more often. But instead, you just see Bob Gimlin at all of the conferences. You see Bob Gimlin on Sasquatch Chronicles. He's just portrayed as this hero when there's a whole nother aspect to it that is not being talked about. So there's aspects of Bigfoot in general that aren't being talked about, or there's disinformation like, oh, they're the Nephilim, or, this or that, and things that are put out to confuse people and keep people in the mystery. Just like if you were to see Bigfoot on television, they would never tell you any truth about Bigfoot, any definitive truth. They would just keep it a mystery and keep it all speculative and a big whirlwind of wonder, which is like the MO for a government cover-up. So I just think there's a deeper correlation between the conferences and the cover-up of Bigfoot and these certain actors within the Bigfoot field, and who's given a cover, potentially like David Paulides, who is, writing one or two books about Bigfoot, and then he comes out with the Missing 411 series and he won't even utter the word Bigfoot, and it makes you go, what is with this guy? So I've heard some other things about him and some other researchers that make me think they are so in it for the money, and they're mentioning things that other people have experienced that they're asking them to not mention, and they're just coming out and putting it in their books anyway, just for monetary gain. And essentially that's what Bigfoot has become to so many people, is this avenue to make money. And it's not Bigfoot truth. It's not the truth. I started on YouTube to educate myself, and I've always been interested in the truth on a number of subjects, but I've never attempted to make any money on YouTube. I've never attempted to make any money off of Bigfoot, because I think it's like ingenuine. It's going to be a conflict of interest. If David Paulides came out and started saying, "Yup, Bigfoot's taking these people, and it could be Dogman, or it could be the Rake creature," any of these things, he's like, he's cutting himself off from the mystery, and even he's in denial of the smiley face killer phenomenon, and yet he's interested in all these water deaths. And the smiley face killer phenomenon is exactly the same modus operandi of what he talks about. These, young white men and young men, college-age guys dying and being found in the water. And there were dozens and dozens of instances where the smiley face was being found at all these murder scenes from the 80s and 90s, and it was on Unsolved Mysteries and everything. And I heard David Paulides talking about, no, I don't give any credence to that. And, he's all in it for himself. He doesn't seem to be about the truth so much as making money. And that's a conflict of interest. So everybody who's trying to make money off of Bigfoot is going to be a conflict of interest. But the truth is more important. And when you're offering the truth, that's when you get the harassment by the government. That's when you're getting shut down. When you're taking groups of 25 people out and showing them Bigfoot in the woods like Bob Garrett, that's when you're having the cover-up go on. So same with the BFRO. They're allowed to keep on going with their shenanigans, because what they do is release information that's homogenized. They don't talk about psychic Sasquatch phenomenon in any of their reports, and they've been caught editing and redacting witness statements and testimony, or discluding things in their reports that they don't want to talk about. And they also don't talk about extremely aggressive Sasquatch encounters, which is also what David's not talking about. It sounds like a lot of times he's talking about aggressive Bigfoot encounters without even mentioning the word Bigfoot. So an abduction would be deemed an aggressive Sasquatch encounter, if I could ever think of one. Disappearance, whatever they're doing with you, eating you, or whatever, playing with your body until you're just a little rag doll to them, and then they put your clothes back on and backwards and stick your helmet back on, like that doctor in Colorado that they found with your brain bashed in and traumatic skull injuries. Who's doing these things? It could be, maybe it's aliens. I don't know. Maybe it's alien abduction. I've heard people allude to that too. But why not speculate? I don't understand why, and I think I really do understand why, because it's all about the money. So anyway, I wanted to share that story with you and just talk about these things. In my own experience with the harassment concerning me and that phone call my wife got. Because, as I'm watching more and more of these episodes, it's just bringing back old memories and bringing back topics that I've brought up. And I've suffered harassment because I was defending MK Davis on Richter's channel, and all of a sudden people are calling my family and threatening them with their employment and trying to get them fired and trying to get me fired from my job, and just disgusting, disturbing behavior that some people are saying, oh, it's public information. Well, yeah, but who's seeking to destroy your character and destroy your livelihood and destroy your relationships with your family over Bigfoot truth? And I would say, well, the government. And then where do you find these people like Richter, who did that to me, and others? And it's at the conferences. You got Richter with his arm around Bob Gimlin, like they're sleeping in bed together or something. And it's like, dude, it's disgusting what's really going on. If you put the pieces together, the puzzle that it's showing, if you have the eyes to see, you can figure it out. If you have the investigative skills to do it, you can figure it out. But most people don't do the legwork. They're not like really into putting it all together. They're just really interested in the mystery and listening to another podcast and hearing another experience. But look at the bigger picture. That's all I'm saying. Look at the bigger picture of Bigfoot. How long are we going to do this until it gets repetitive and it gets boring and it's the same old crap over and over and the same old, accounts and the same old Sasquatch Chronicles episode? It's, there's 600 of them or so, and it's kind of the same old thing. A lot of them are good, but some of the older ones where they're talking about the cover-up and the government cover-up are the most interesting ones. So that's kind of where I like to look at things. I'm interested in what the deeper truth is. I'm interested in the potential cover-up of Bigfoot by the government, and I want to know why it is that Bigfoot is kept as this, like I said, this perpetual whirlwind of wonder. And instead of having definitive truths like, yes, these things are psychic, or there's different kinds, and the ones in this region are like this, they don't want to do it. I mean, Chris Noel's talking about civic duty, but more importantly, the government's always been about the cover-up of the truth. They're the ones selling drugs to your kids. They're the ones sending your family members out overseas to get amputated appendages and be murdered for the corporate gain overseas and the world banks and all of that. So, I mean, the government's been infiltrated by secret societies. I could go into it, but if you don't know already and you're not investigating it, it's just like these topics I'm talking about now. You've had the chance to learn about it numerous times, and if you've neglected to educate yourself about it, that's on you, and that's obviously something that you're not prepared for, and you're not maybe intelligent enough to figure out, or you don't dare even look at it out of the fear. But it's definitely an aspect that's going on in the world, and so you're never going to get the truth from the government, ever. Never, ever, ever. All you're going to get is harassment as you get closer to the truth. So just a little reminder out there to embrace the people doing the work who are actually speaking about the truth. Embrace the Mike Pattersons of the world who will tell you about psychic Sasquatch and who've had these experiences, myself included with the psychic Sasquatch experiences. I did my interview on the Xeno Hunters channel called Strange Bigfoot Encounters as a testament to what I've experienced. And who knows how much of that is a blessing to me because of my dedication to the truth and my willingness and my veracity to go after this stuff when other people will just let it pass by downstream and forget about it. So anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Just some food for thought. Stay educated and have a great day.